Well, we've written to the Prime Minister to urgently pull out all stops, to be unstinting in its efforts to get a humanitarian pause, a ceasefire, to get assistance through a corridor to the people of Gaza, the 2.3 million people. The reason why is that in the wake of the atrocities in Israel, which we unequivocally condemn, we now have a siege. In that siege, water, food, medicine has all been cut off and people are being shelled at the same time. The water situation is dire. There is no drinking water left. So we've got 50,000 mothers pregnant that have no water. We have nursing mothers that have no water to drink. We have children, infants, toddlers, young kids who don't have enough water to drink, and they're being forcibly moved, half the population, from the north to the south. It is a dire situation. So we really need Mr Albanese and his ministers to be unstinting in their efforts to get their allies, the US, which has just blocked a resolution in the Security Council for a humanitarian ceasefire, and other neighbours and other countries like Qatar, who can have a hand in getting release of the Israeli and other foreign national hostages. We need Australia to be working assiduously to get protection and to get that humanitarian corridor and that ceasefire going.
Israel, though, now says that it will allow aid into Gaza from Egypt. That'll go some way to help those people who are running out of the essential supplies in the territory, won't it?
Well, we've been waiting for this for days, but if it works at the scale that's required, it will be incredibly important. But I can tell you, 100 trucks is not going to be able to get enough food, water and medicine to 1 million people. We need the lifting of the siege of Gaza now, and we need Mr Albanese and his government to help stop people dehydrating and dying in the streets. That's what's going on right now on our television screens. So, Mr Albanese, I implore your ministers to do all you can to work with other like-minded governments to get a ceasefire.
You're also calling for a humanitarian corridor to allow Palestinians to get out of Gaza. Mark, how would that work?
Well, look, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. At the moment, as viewers will be aware, the Israeli government and IDF, the Israeli Defence Forces, have ordered the population of Gaza, 1 million people, to move from one end of the Gaza Strip to another, and yet the area that they're moving to is still being shelled. So it's not safe. So many people are electing to stay where they are. Really what we need is a ceasefire, a pause initially and then a ceasefire so that assistance can come in properly, because it's the sheer scale of numbers of people trying to walk through streets with rubble, with no water and food, the disabled, children, pregnant women, the sick in hospitals, the injured in hospitals, are not able to move and get out of a corridor. And as we know, Egypt is not cooperating either in letting people come into Egypt. So really the ceasefire is everything.
Just looking at the government's response then, as we've had it so far, they have repeatedly, roundly condemned the actions of Hamas against Israel. And they've offered $10 million in humanitarian assistance to civilians affected by the conflict in Gaza. And today we've heard from Labour backbenchers Ed Husic and Anne Ali speaking out about the conflict. What more in practical terms do you want?
Well, we share the condemnation of armed Palestinian groups and their terrible atrocities in Israel and the kidnappings. And we welcome, and we have welcomed, the government's $10 million worth of humanitarian assistance and their calls for protection. But now we need Australia to work with its allies, the United States government, which has just blocked a Security Council resolution where a majority of countries around the world were calling for a humanitarian corridor and a ceasefire. The US blocked that. The US is our closest ally. We must talk some sense to them so we can get a lifting of that siege, because the sheer number of people, not enough trucks of assistance are going to be able to get through to reach the sheer number of people that are now in need of water, food and medicine.
There are a number of ways this conflict could develop, of course, but given the geopolitics and the history of the region, realistically, a ceasefire is unlikely to be one of them, is it?
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I think Australia has very good relationships with Qatar, for example, which can also be an important player in this, in organising the release of the hostages. Getting the release of the hostages critical at the same time as getting the assistance and a lifting of the siege, restoration of electricity so water pumps and water purification plants can turn back on and hospitals can have electricity to operate, for example. So we can do both at the same time. We need cool heads to prevail. It's totally understandable that the anguish that people felt in Israel, and the world's heart went out to the Israeli people, but now the world's heart must go out to the people of Gaza at the same time. We must be balanced and cool heads must prevail and talk down those that are looking for more extreme actions. It is simply not possible to occupy a city of 2 million people. That would be a great humanitarian catastrophe if an invasion occurs.